Hi, my name is Cora Morley, and I'm a student at the University of South Florida. And today I'm interviewing my mentor, Gaesenee. She's a telehealth manager at Tampa General Hospital, and she's going to help me learn more about the human resource functions in healthcare management. And so, to start us off, can you briefly tell us just a little bit about what you do as a telehealth manager and what led you to this role?
Yeah, Telehealth Manager, what led me to the role was I took an interest when I was up in Philadelphia in health tech because I saw that it was going to be the future. And so I actually started going to meetups and just learning more about it. And it's mainly just, managing day-to-day telehealth operations for a health system, figuring ways to grow the program, optimize it, things like that.
Awesome. And so, in what ways does your role involve human resource related responsibilities such as hiring and training staff?
Yes. So when it comes to training staff, um, obviously anybody who works for underneath me or sometimes there's like adjacent roles, right? Where there'll be multiple roles going to like maybe a director or a VP where you want to cross-train people. I would take part in that. A lot of times I work even with Epic training teams to train providers not only on some of like the telehealth best practice protocols, but then our Epic trainers will train them on the more technical component of Epic. When it comes to hiring, I haven't hired anybody in this role yet, but in my previous roles, it was very much talking with HR. They kind of knew just from the job description of what we wanted, and then it was, getting maybe some of the resumes that looked like they would be a good fit, reviewing those, making notes. A lot of times being part of that initial kind of screening interview um, from the person because again HR they have a broad idea of a lot of jobs, but sometimes there might be something more specific that we're looking for that we can really kind of help tailor it down. So screening interviewers, making notes, following up with HR on potential people we might want to make an offer to.
And so, you kind of did walk through the process of when hiring someone for the team. And
Mhm.
so, what kind of onboarding or training do you provide for telehealth staff? And how do you ensure they feel prepared for the role?
Yes. So we actually had to do this very much on the fly during the pandemic because we were training a lot of people. And so I was lucky. I worked with some people, other coworkers too, that helped me with the training of kind of creating scripting.
Hmm.
We call them a lot of times SOPs, so standard operating procedures, building those. Another thing that's really good for training, like when I again reference like my Epic trainers that I've used in the past, I've used kind of the same main Epic trainer if we've went to different platforms. So that trainer kind of knows the backstory of like
Yeah.
where we've come and where we are now. But yeah, a lot of it, the SOPs and all my jobs, I've used those to kind of help train people on the key functions. Scripting too. Scripting helps when a lot of times if you're trying to front desk people or people making those appointments when they don't know if something is telehealth appropriate, we can give them guidelines or making sure the person is appropriate for telehealth, asking questions. You'd be surprised to be like, hey, do you have access to your email so they can get access to the link? Or hey, do
Right.
you know how to sign on to your my chart? Because that maybe is where they need to, access the visit. We even had in a scripting of, hey, do you own a smartphone? Because certain people would be like, yeah, of course I'd love to do telehealth. And it'd be older people and they didn't know the smartphone because they just didn't know really what telehealth was.
Wow.
Uh, it's
Awesome.
learning,
Yeah.
learning.
And so, with that learning, how do you handle performance evaluations or feedback with your team members?
So that's great. Really, when it comes to that, like the yearly ones that, HR has us do, and
Mhm.
a lot of times are tied to, yearly goals. Really, you kind of, those I would have to say are probably maybe some of the easiest ones because really it's kind of the weekly check-ins to make sure that the priorities are still set, that there isn't, any kind of issues, any kind of obstruction, making sure that whatever the person is working on is still part of the priority, not even for the department, but for the organization. So it really starts in like the weekly check-ins. The bigger goals every year, you can create so and have stuff measured too, but weekly is making sure. And I only say that because there's been times where I've been told to make up yearly goals at the end of the year because it wasn't done in the beginning. It's just like kind of like a free for all.
And with that being said, what has been the biggest human resource related challenge that you've faced as a manager?
I think the biggest human resource challenge is, you can't control everything.
Right.
So learning with each person what motivates them and how to like intrinsically motivate that person. Because a lot of times it does take a lot of work, but each person is motivated a different way. And you really need to tailor it that way because I think different people find motivation in different things.
Right. And on the other side, what has been the most rewarding? And how do you,
I
yeah.
think the I think the most rewarding thing, I think for any leader, the most rewarding thing is when you see one of your either, team members or even someone that you've mentored or someone on your team excelling
Hmm.
and also loving what they do. But just seeing someone thrive is the greatest thing ever. Um, by far. It really is. More so than anything I could ever accomplish.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, especially being your mentee, I think it's so fun to like learn from people and it's so useful that information to us as well. And so seeing that it actually works, like what you're saying and helping us get to those places is super helpful. And so have you ever had to resolve a workplace conflict and how did you go about resolving it?
Oh. I mean, that's a good thing because a lot of times, again, going with things that are out of your control is honestly making sure you do something in a standard way, in a way, that's why you have HR resources at
Hmm.
places, to make sure you're doing something the right way. But
Right.
again, it's hard because, even working with other departments where you have to depend on them to get maybe a big project that you're working on done. Like for me, I have to bank on IT doing something.
Hmm.
And they obviously have their own goals and
Yeah.
objectives. I am just one speck of what they need to do. And honestly, when it comes to working conflict over that, you always kind of build in those layers. So you have the first kind of initial one where you're trying to do it yourself, like peer to peer.
Mhm.
And then the same thing too. It's like then you can escalate it to your superior and see what they say. And then a lot of times what happens in that case is, maybe my higher level director or VP will get together with the IT's higher level and VP. And they always say this, I feel like it's such corporate speak, but to like reset expectations because, we have an expectation of when we thought something was going to be done. They kind of have that knowledge to understand why it hasn't been done, when they said it was going to happen. And how do we get everybody I hate using these, but like everyone rowing in the same direction again.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers because,
Yeah.
I don't. It's still very hard. It's still that if you probably had to ask anybody what their biggest biggest kind of bottleneck in any position is that is not is getting people to be motivated to care about what you care about and
Mm,
doing it in a way where you don't burn bridges. And because, you can always just do sheer force where
yeah.
maybe your boss is the big boss and just, wields that hammer or that axe, but at what cost? Because I've watched people purposely drag their feet when
Mm,
someone's handled conflict the wrong way. So they've purposely, you know, done things a little bit slower than they would would do. So it's definitely a balance. And I think a lot of times the escalation, people wait longer than they should, but mostly because I think when you break relationships like that, it's hard. You can never get those back. So sometimes you have to be okay with that kind of slow moving, methodical way of doing things.
mm. Awesome. And then so that brings us to our last question. What advice would you give to a student interested in pursuing a career that blends healthcare management and human resources?
Oh, that I will give, my advice to this is probably the same for if you said HR or IT or
Yep.
telehealth, is figuring out what skill sets you need
Hmm.
and then finding someone to understand, how you could get those resources. So, big proponent, just kind of even how I decided to get in telehealth. I found random meetups. There's always professional groups. You can always subscribe to emails. You can go on LinkedIn and randomly cold email people, which I
Yep.
know sometimes you don't get it. I've had people where I've done that and no one responds to me, but I've had times where people do, and that has made all the difference. Asking connections, telling everybody you're interested in HR. Um, and again, if it's healthcare and HR, I guarantee you there's probably some kind of healthcare HR thing. There's definitely HR
Yeah.
um, meetups. I saw one just from Suncoast. They wanted to help people career pivot, and it was for all these HR people who wanted to career pivot. They could meet up and discuss and hang out. So, definitely it's a mixture of doing the research yourself and trying to find those spaces, but then also finding those people that will help you make sure you're finding the right spaces.
Well, thank you so much for just taking the
Yeah,
time to share your experiences, and this gave me a very valuable perspective
yeah,
on human resources and healthcare. So thank you.
yeah, no problem.